Okay, so a very big welcome to Pennine Ham Amateur Radio Club, and a big welcome to members of our club and friends and visitors at tonight's meeting. Delighted to see one or two people, some of whom who are members of our club, who haven't been at the Zoom meetings for some time, and lovely to see you here this evening, and hope you enjoy the presentation. Greg doesn't know this because he's already said hello to our member Jeff ON8NT out in Belgium. But it was Jeff who dropped me a note a few weeks ago to say, I came across this wonderful website of KJ6ER and details of his antennas. I bet Greg would make a great speaker for one of our club meetings.
Thank you,
Uh,
Jeff.
so I'm crediting Jeff. He's always finding great people for me. So I dropped Greg a note and responded so quickly, and we've got him here tonight. And it is a fantastic website. Greg also did send me an email with lots of other links on it, and I'll make those available as well so that people can get hold of those on the club website and have a look through the materials that Greg's produced. So what I'd say to you, Greg, just before handing the microphone over to you, and Phil, G4UDU is proving that point, sat next to his mobile home there in the countryside, that we've got a group of people here, many of whom absolutely love portable operating and also love operating QRP and love the two things together as well. So great to have you. Poor old Ken, G4VZV, one of our club members, who's got a little property there in the south of Spain, loves going out to Spain, Greg, operating next to the salt lagoons,
Oh, wow.
working with about 70 or 80 watts into a vertical antenna, the most amazing Pacific DX, like in the bucketfuls of stations down there in the Pacific, because of the fantastic advantage of propagation, both where you're closer to the equator, but
Yeah.
also because he's sitting there next to the salt lagoons that just must
Mm,
must be worth a three element beam and a kilowatt
easy,
of power
easy.
easily. Yeah. So, but Ken, it's been so hot for Ken. Ken has gone over there to do some radio operating, and it's just been too hot to go outside to try and do it. And in the
It's been
evenings,
36 here
yeah,
in
exactly,
Somerset. Yeah.
exactly,
Wow.
Phil. And in
That,
the evenings, Ken suffers with the other big problem down there is mosquitoes. So the only way of operating then is to lock himself into his car, and that's not the nicest thing to do in this weather. So, Greg, that's us, and we're
okay.
really pleased to have you. And I'm going to hand the microphone over to you and let you take it away.
That's fantastic. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you, in particular Jeff, who originally found the website to invite me into your virtual home there in the UK. I'm here in California. It's only quarter to 12 California time, so it's almost time for lunch. Maybe I should go have a bite right now. Oh, wait, no, I can't do that now. All right, let me do the share thing because I got this presentation and I'm going to click on share and I'm going to give you three, two, one. Let me know when you can see it. I think you can see it.
Well, you can see it.
Look at that. And look at that. What do you think about that, Nick? Even got your
Fabulous.
logo up there.
Fabulous. Yeah, I like you. I like you pinched it. Fantastic.
Yeah, there it is. All right, let's get going here. All right, let's see. Let's hit this key. There we go. All right. Well, as I mentioned, I'm here, right here. Here's your far western colony of California. Uh, I live right here in Silicon Valley. Campbell is actually a suburb of San Jose. San Jose is really the heart of Silicon Valley. But as I was talking to the other Nick, I was born in upstate New York many years ago and got my electrical engineering degree in Ohio. And then I've been in Silicon Valley ever since. I worked for some big companies, but also I really loved working in startups. Those were a lot of fun, especially when the internet was blooming back in the late 90s and early 2000s. We've got five grown kids spread around the country with six grandkids. I play a lousy game of golf, but I have a lot of fun. I'm a bogey golfer. I do a lot of hiking with I call it a backpack. I think you call it a rucksack. But I do a lot of hiking up here in the California hills. Love to do that with my ICOM 705. I do a lot of music recording, performing, but I'm a geek, and I'm very proud to be a geek. And my geeky passion is parks on the air. I probably do about 90% of my operations portable. For Parks on the Air, I believe you're familiar with that. I've done over 1,000 activations, and activations when you go to a park and people try to work you from all over the world. And I've worked the UK, I've worked all over Europe, Asia, from a park in California with one of my antennas. I primarily do sideband. I should do CW because it's a much more efficient platform, but I just love to talk. So I've done a lot of sideband. And so I'm going to move my clock out of the way so you can see my logo. There it is. All right, let's keep moving. All right, so click on this. There we go. So yeah, you guys mentioned that I have this website, and if you haven't been there, I encourage you. Everything is free. I don't believe in charging for creating these antenna designs, putting them in a book, and then trying to sell it. I believe we all should be more socialistic when it comes to our knowledge, and I want to share it broadly because I love this hobby, and I want to encourage more people to not only go portable, but to homebrew their own antennas because it's so much fun, especially our younger hams in their 20s and 30s. And I've talked to quite a few who really, up until Parks on the Air come out, they didn't like the idea of kind of sitting at home. But when they saw they could go out with their backpack, rucksack, and hike around and put up a portable antenna, they got really excited. So if you go to KJ6ER.net, you get all of my antenna designs. They're always up to date. These are persistent links. I update what they're linked to, little things every month. When people ask me questions that weren't in my PDFs, they're all about 15 to 20 pages long. I always give them, I always try to answer their question, then I put the answer in the PDF. So I keep it as a live document. And I also put out a monthly newsletter. And in the newsletter, I focus on ham radio topics, but I also focus on new antennas that I'm releasing. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I only put out one a month, so that's not a lot of spam. You can also access, I call it the Antenna Geeks email list. You can click on that and join it. And then you have an archive of all the newsletters, some of the things I do on YouTube. And for those people, there are some people that don't or cannot build their own antennas. So you can buy them. They're handmade. We have them on a shop called Etsy here in the States. And I think they ship internationally. But in any case, all my designs are free. So you can take notes if you want, but everything I'm going to talk about is on my website, including the slides. The slides are just a subset of something that is another big file called the Antennas Primer on my website. Okay? All right. So I was very fortunate. I'm sure you've heard of the ARRL. I know that's American, but you probably have a British equivalent or a European equivalent. I was very privileged and honored about a year ago to win a prize in the 80 through 10 meter antenna design competition. It was released in the QST magazine in June, the announcement. And as part of that, they wrote a 5-page article on the performer antenna, which I'm going to talk a lot about tonight, some of the science behind it and why I designed it. And so I was really honored by that. I was really proud of that. And that really gave the antenna some global visibility. So I've been interacting. I probably get about 20 emails a day overnight. And I answer them every morning over my 2 cups of Italian roast coffee. Yes, I love Italian roast coffee. I don't drink tea. I know that's a British thing, but I love Italian roast coffee. And so I answer my emails that way. And so I love doing that. And then in every magazine, the people can vote on their favorite article, which lo and behold, the Performer article won in that particular. This was announced in December of 2025. So I was very honored not only to get an award, but to have the article in QST magazine, but also to get recognized as a favorite article. So that made me very happy. And that shows me that there's a lot of people out in the world that are really interested in building their own antennas. And that's my primary objective. I want people to homebrew their own antennas. I'm really excited about that. Okay, so what do I do and why do I do it? Well, I don't invent antennas, but I redesign classic antennas. How about that? I try to simplify them and I try to create a fresh implementation for portable use. A lot of the antennas I use are typically QTH antennas. I try to make them much more portable and I try to simplify them. And in a moment, I'll talk about how I call that elegance. But right now, one of the things when I first joined Hewlett Packard right out of college as an engineer, I sat about 50 feet away from Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard. That goes way back. That goes back into the late 70s, early 80s. They were still alive and actively involved in the company. And one of the things that Bill Hewlett, the technical mind of the two, taught us is you got to have design principles. Whenever you go about on a new project, you got to have design principles, design objectives. Why are you doing what you're doing? And most importantly, they got to be measurable. Because how do you know if you achieve that objective if you can't come up with a measurable quantifier? So, my first design principle, I focus on performance. And again, these are all portable antennas. Now, I do know about a third of the people that build these or buy these, they leave them installed at home, which I find interesting, but I never intended that, but I'm glad they're doing that. Uh, First and foremost is performance. I focus on high radiation efficiency and a very effective antenna at what it was designed to do. All of them are resonant. No external tuners are required. They're all one band at a time, even though they are multiple bands, 6, 7, 8 bands, but they're all one band at a time. And I design them specifically that way. So one, they are resonant on that band. Two, they have a predictable radiation pattern. And most importantly, they're very efficient. And when I say efficient, I talk about radiation efficiency. So if you apply 100 watts to this antenna at the feed point, I mean, there is some coax loss, but let's just pretend it's 100 watts at the feed point. I want you to radiate at least 90 of those watts into the air, into the ether. You'd be surprised. Most ground-mounted verticals only radiate about half that. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So I say I want 90% radiation efficiency or more. And I get that through my computer modeling, and I do a lot of that. All right. Now, because these are portable antennas, you got to be fast and simple to deploy. I don't want complicated esoteric antennas that take 30 minutes to set up in the field. And by the time you get on the air, guys like me already made 50 contacts. I went out with a guy once. He had a beautiful hex beam. He tried to make it go portable. It took him 43 minutes to set it up. It took me 3 minutes to set up my performer antenna. And by the time he got his set up, I literally did have 50 contacts in the log already. And then he got on the air. So I believe in a fast and simple deployment, set up as well as take down. Sometimes you have to take down really quickly, especially if you got a call from home saying, "Where are you? Time to come home and do some projects." So I say 5 minutes or less. Most of them take less than that, but elegance. When something is simple and it's easy to deploy or easy to use, I call that elegance. So performance, elegance, and convenience, because these are portable antennas. So I don't want them to take a lot of space in your garage, your car trunk, your back seat. I want to make it simple. So if you use a backpack or rucksack, a picnic table, or even if we have things in the US, you probably have equivalent called HOA. I forgot what it stands for, but it's where you live. It's a restricted neighborhood. And a lot of times you can't put up antennas. So a lot of these hams that buy my antennas, they have them hidden in their garage. Then after dinner with the family, they go out back, set up the antenna in less than 5 minutes, and play on the radio for 3 hours and take it down before the neighborhood marshal yells at them the next day. So performance, 90% efficient. Elegance, fast and simple deployment, 5 minutes or less. And convenience, 5 pounds or less. Very lightweight, very compact, easy to store and easy to transport. Straightforward? I think so. Okay. All right. So now when I think about a new antenna, what am I thinking about? Well, I am a geek, and I'm proud to be a geek, and I'm an engineer, electrical engineer. So I do think a little bit about math and physics, and I use my computer modeling software for NEC2, which I'll talk about in just a second, to help me understand some of that. But I have to do a lot of independent research because it's not obvious. Field theory and electrical engineering, when I took that in college, was by far the toughest course. And so I have to relive some of the pain that I went through in college to understand some of the field theory. But I think it's important because guys like me want to understand that. But I only spend about 5% of my time doing that. Very small amount of time. I love computer modeling. I use 4NEC2. which is a global standard now. There's a lot easier versions that have come out since then, like EasyNet or MMGAL. But I started on the most complicated one. It produces beautiful radiation graphics, which we'll take a look at. But I really enjoy using that, and I spend about 15% of my time with that program. I'm a left brain, right brain. Even though I majored in electrical engineering, I minored in child psychology. I know it's a weird combination, but I leveraged far more child psychology in my career than I did electrical engineering. And I'm sure those of you that worked in large corporations understand that all too well. So after modeling, we live on these humble little lots in California. Silicon Valley in particular, they're about a quarter acre big. And so this is my lovely house with all the solar panels. It's always sunny 90% of the time here. This is my antenna proving ground, and I spend 80% of my time after I take a design out of the virtual world, I got to bring it into the real world. And I deploy it here in my backyard. And believe me, there's a lot of difference when you go from the virtual to the real world. But this is important because you got things like velocity factors, near field surroundings, ground elements that affect your antenna, trees, everything. So you have to take it out there and you have to kind of bring it into the real world. But then, most importantly, after I spend all that time from the understanding the math and physics to the modeling to my backyard antenna proving ground, I take it to POTA. And before I even share one of my PDF designs, I use it in POTA for at least a month or two because I want to understand how it works. I talk to the hunters and I do A/B test comparisons on multiple antennas, and I learn a lot from the hunters. And so they're my guinea pigs, but I call that's real world evaluation. And there are changes that I make. I mean, there's a lot of changes from here to here, but there's also changes when I go from here to there because I make the design more efficient. I make it easier to deploy because then I start using it in the field. So it's a great real world evaluation. Once I go through all of that, then and only then do I write my 15 to 20 page PDF. And in it, I include all the computer modeling data, the charts, the parts list, where to source the parts, typically on Amazon, that's the cheapest, how to build it, SWR suite tests out in the field. I try to make it as pragmatic as possible so anyone, regardless of your ham radio skill, can use one of these. And if you've seen one of my PDFs, you'll know I try to make it relatively simple. I don't want to overcomplicate it. And I'm proud to say this number is kind of small now, but I'm proud to say that over the last, I don't know, 2 years since I've been doing this, I have now it's close to 100,000 downloads. I should update my slide. All because they're free. And when you offer something for free and people find it of value, which I'm very proud of, it makes its way around the world. So I'm very happy about that. And again, all these designs are on my website, so feel free to go there. Okay, so I call these, I think you must have had these same toys in Europe, Tinker Toys. I loved Tinker Toys when I was a kid, and I play with Tinker Toys with my grandkids. You know, they look like that. You probably had those. Well, what I try to do to make all these designs simple and interchangeable is I use the same components. I don't believe in finding all these little odd things that you need to do for that antenna, but not that antenna. So I use all the same components. So I have people that have built 3 or 4 of my antennas from the same stuff that's in their ham radio stuff box in the garage. And I think that's really important. And what are those components? Telescoping whips, 25 and 17 feet. You've got them everywhere. They're everywhere in the world now. I like telescoping whips. Whoops, someone's got their, it looks like there you go, G6HLL. That happens, no worries. In California, they don't allow wires in trees. They don't allow that, believe it or not. So a lot of the antennas I design are freestanding on tripods or PVC tubes with a spike mount on the ground. So that's why I use a lot of telescoping whips. But I love those because they're infinitely variable, right? You can tune your antenna to resonance, which, by the way, may not always be your lowest SWR point, but I like to tune to resonance. I like to minimize the reactance in the antennas, but you can use SWR. They both work. Mirror mounts, some people call them trucker mounts or CB mounts. A, B, C, always be choking. Always be choking. I never operate without a choke at the feed point. Never. In all of my antenna designs, and I strongly recommend you consider doing the same. You don't want your feed line to become part of the antenna system, unless it's designed for that. Rarely it is. Some end-fed half waves use that. I don't like that. I like to control everything because I'm an engineer and I like to be precise. So I like to take the feed line out of the equation because if you don't, especially on a quarter wave vertical, the outer shield on your coax, if this wasn't here, becomes a third radial or a fifth radial or whatever it is you're using. And it totally messes up your impedance. It impacts your radiation pattern. It doesn't make it a happy antenna. So I always, ABC, always be choking. And I love, my favorite kind of choke is just a simple little mix 31 toroid with some coax wrapped around it. You can make your own or you can buy one relatively inexpensive in the US or anywhere in the world, of course. Okay, so those are very typical. As I mentioned, you got to have some support. If you don't want to penetrate the ground, there's a lot of lightweight tripods out there. There's also some heavy surveyor tripods, whatever you want to use. Uh, I also like to use PVC tubes with spike mounts at the bottom. Whatever you want, whatever it is to give it some support, it works really well. Ununs and balance, with the exception of the quarter wave vertical, I use an unun, a 4-to-1 unun, 4-to-1 balun, 9-to-1 unun, 49-to-1, or 56-to-1. That's my favorite unun. I love all of those, but most of my antennas, other than the Performer, use one of those. And again, you can make your own. Really easy to do that. Everyone, there's so many videos on YouTube now, or you can buy one, and they're not too expensive. But they're really important because they do the impedance matching. They do the impedance matching. Nothing to do with radiation efficiency. They just match your coax, your feed line, to the antenna. All right. I love silicon coated wire. I have a whole bunch I buy in bulk. I like different colors because I do have a right brain colorful memory. So I use different colors for different things. Regardless, I like silicon coated because when you're out in the field, they can easily get tangled up. Even if you wire wrap them around a kite string winder or something like that, they still get tangled. So I like silicon coated wire, and I like 18 gauge. I don't know. I think that's equivalent in Europe, AWG. 18 gauge, very thin wire, very lightweight. You don't need anything, especially if you run 100 watts. You don't need anything too thick. I also have antenna designs that call for non-conducting segments. And I'll talk about a couple of those where you don't want the antenna current to go through that part of the antenna. So we call it weed whacker here in the States, non-conductive nylon line, the thing that spins and chops up your weeds. Anything that's non-conducting, you can get that relatively inexpensive as well. Uh, I love Mueller clips. I think that's a German word. Mueller clips. These are, a lot of people call them battery terminal clips. I love these things, the 10 amp versions. You hook the wires to them, you hook your non-conducting segment to them, whatever it is. They in turn hook on to your whips because I have antennas that will just extend the whip with a wire. They can also hook on to your ground to give you some elevated radials. But I just love these things. They're really effective. They've been out in the field for years and they never fail. So a lot of Mueller clips, however you want to call it. But I know my favorite, and I want to thank my friends in Germany, Vago connectors. We call them Wago connectors in California, but I think they're called Vago. My German friends online can confirm. But Vago connectors, they basically allow you to put two wires, one at each end, and have them connect. It's real simple. They're lever connectors. Now, you can either use bare wire. I prefer wire ferrules. They call them wire ferrules, where you just crimp them onto the end of your wire. They stick in there. You lift that up, you stick in there, you close that, and you got a very, very secure connection. And a lot of my antennas, because they're one band at a time, you have to adjust the length of the radial or the length of the radiator, if it's a wire radiator. And so I use these to interconnect my different band segments, the Vago connector. So these are the same things I use in every single antenna. These are my Tinker Toys. Pretty straightforward? Good. I assume silence is golden. By all means, I love to be very informal. If you have an urgent question that can't wait till an email overnight, by all means, just feel free to interrupt me and I'll be happy to answer. But I get, like I said, I get a couple dozen emails overnight every day. If you wake up at 2 in the morning and you have a question about an antenna, by all means, send me an email. I don't know why you'd be thinking about that at 2 a.m., but just in case, send me an email. I'm happy to do it. So, my antennas. Yeah, I started doing this back in 2020. when I first started doing parks on the air. And I looked at commercial antennas and I thought, gosh, these antennas are so expensive. I don't want to buy one of those for 800 American dollars. So I decided to design my own, and that's where the Performer came from. And the Performer was the first antenna I designed, and I'll talk about it tonight. It's a quarter wave vertical, elevated feed point with two elevated radials. Why? For high radiation efficiency over 90%. And we'll talk about why that is. So the Performer, and that is probably my most popular antenna. But then I got into half wave antennas, and these also began to grow and become more interesting. And I got into something called the Dominator, which is an end-fed half wave antenna using a 49 or 56 to 1 antenna. I created the Challenger, which is an off-center fed half wave. They're both like vertical dipoles. I like vertical antennas. Looks like a vertical dipole. That's end fed. That one's off center fed with a short counterpoise drooping to the ground. After the Performer, this is my most popular antenna, growing fast. A lot more YouTubers have begun to talk about that antenna. I then got into arrays because I wanted better DX, and I worked Europe over the pole from California, parks on the air with 100 watts by using a phased array, a Dominator parasitic, I said phased parasitic array. That's where you only feed coax to one, and the other one's just a piece of metal in the near field that helps focus your signal and take some of the radiation and put it in a certain direction to give you some gain. That's called a parasitic array. I did the same thing for the Challenger. And incidentally, each one of these is its own PDF antenna design on my website. So if anything I mention is interesting to you, it's on my website. I then did the same thing for the Performer quarter wave, except I also created a phased array. That's where you feed both antennas with coax at slightly different degrees of separation. And so it gives you some interesting radiation patterns. You can move them around and such. They're pretty complicated, but some hams love playing with those. And so I created a phased array. In addition to that, I had a lot of people say, what about, these antennas work so well, but they skip over, a lot of ground, the first 1,000 miles. So how do I get inside the skip zone? So I created a simple little adaptation where you add a wire radiator to the Performer and you get this NVIS antenna. And it's, again, highly efficient. And I'll talk about that a little bit tonight. I've always loved Les Moxon, a famous English, excuse me, British engineer. Didn't want to get that messed up. British engineer. He created the Moxon antenna. I've always admired that antenna. But you have to put them up a half. They're like a dipole. You got to put them up a half wave and they're single band. But I created a lower to the ground multi-band Marauder. I call it the Marauder Moxon inspired antenna, and where this becomes one bent end-fed dipole. This is the bent end-fed reflector behind it. We'll talk about that a little bit. As we kind of lose some of the cycle and we get into the lower bands, because we all know the upper bands are beginning to fade, especially now during the summer. I'm creating something called the Nether. The Nether. I have to come up with funny names. I just do that. Makes it more interesting. It's a compact inverted V where you actually fold the ends in and you can get 80 through 20 meters. 80, 60, 40, 30, and 20. Kind of my low band antenna. I'll be bringing that out this fall. So if you're on my Antenna Geeks list, you'll be the first to get that design. I also, this summer, I'm going to be putting out a triangular loop full wave antenna called the Thruster. It's a bidirectional through the triangle. It's again a resonant antenna on each one of those bands with a couple dBi gain. It works really well. I've used it at POTA now for a couple of months, so I know it's going to be fun. I'll probably release that in July, August. I've always loved the half square antenna for DX. And so I came up with a portable version using two telescoping whips and a top crosswire. This is roughly a quarter wave, that's roughly a half wave, and that's roughly a quarter wave. So again, one band at a time. I've used this at POTA as well and worked a lot of DX over the pole. So I know that works really well. And I have a parasitic version of the triangular array. So those are all my current antennas and a couple of the future ones, which you can get designs for on the web when they're available. And the other ones are already available. So Nick, I'm going to get into a little bit of antenna fundamentals, but I'm going to look at you. See, for you now, what is it, 10 after 8 local time in the UK? Give me a time where I have to stop, and I'll work backwards from that.
Greg, I hate to give you a time. We normally say to our presenters, you can, I would say, keep a presentation in total to about 45 minutes. But if you want to go on longer and everyone's happy with that, and I can tell by people's looking around the room, just keep going.
Okay.
If it gets too far, we had a lovely radio ham several years ago. He
Yeah.
gave a talk on the radio on the Titanic, and he turned
Oh,
out to be an expert on it. And
wow.
when he had been going non-stop without pause for about an hour and 40 minutes,
Oh
I,
my
I
goodness.
gently suggested that maybe he'd like to come back the next week, which he did. So
Okay.
yeah,
I won't do
please go ahead, Greg.
I won't do that. I'm watching my little clock here. You see it's 10 after 12 local. I'll shoot for 12:30 my time, which I think is 8:30 your time. No. Yeah. 8:30 your time? Yeah, 8:30 your time.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay. I'll shoot for that. It may go a few minutes longer, but again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So I won't get into a lot of the theory, but there is some theory about why I elevate my quarter wave and why I strongly encourage you to consider the same. Let's talk about that. First of all, let's talk about a resonant antenna. And I'll keep this relatively simple. You've all, I'm sure in the UK, or all over Europe, when you passed your ham radio exam, you know this equation. Z, impedance, is equal to R, real resistance, plus J, square root of -1, forget that, you don't need to know that, times X, reactance, right? Reactance is either capacitive or inductive. So when you have a resonant antenna, your reactance X equals zero. That equals zero, right? So what that basically means in reality, that means the capacitive reactance offsets the inductive reactance. It's typically 0 to a few ohms, single digits, but it's very, very small. So when that goes to 0, your antenna impedance, it's just real resistance. Real resistance. And what's closer to real resistance than resistors? So here's your ICOM, Yaesu, whatever you're running. It's looking at your resonant antenna. What does it see? It sees two resistors in series to ground. That's it. Two resistors in series to ground. And Nick, just like everything else in life, there's a good resistor and there's a bad resistor. There's a yin and there's a yang. Let's talk about the good resistor. The good resistor is called radiation resistance. I'm sure you've heard about this. This is what helps you transmit electromagnetic waves in all directions, very productive energy. And it's inherent in the type of antenna you're using. For example, a quarter wave vertical is about 37 ohms, right? A center fed dipole at the appropriate elevation over ground is about twice that. It's about 70 ohms if it's fed in the middle. A three-quarter wave is just a little bit more than a quarter wave, about 40 ohms, but that's built into your antenna. That's inherent. So if you use an antenna, you don't have a lot of direct control over that. That's just part of your antenna. Okay, but that's the good resistor. So we like that, and that's why I put it in green. But like I said, there's a bad resistor. It's called loss resistance. That's anything, all of the power that comes in through your coax to the antenna that doesn't end up being radiated. That includes losses in your conductors, insulators, loading elements, but by far the greatest losses, and I see this and I cringe when I see this, but it is what it is. The greatest losses in these antennas are to the ground, heating up the bugs that crawl around under the dirt. You don't want to do that. That is what? That is wasted energy. Now, my antennas, I say, are 90% efficient, at least 90% efficient, at least, which means I design them so that 90% of the electromagnetic energy is radiated from the antenna. Only 10% or less is wasted somewhere, potentially in the ground, in the conductors, what have you. Many, many ground-mounted vertical antennas, they waste half of their energy. Will they still get great SWR? Of course they will. But SWR has nothing to do with antenna efficiency. It's matching efficiency. They're completely different. Don't tell me I have a fantastic antenna because I've got a perfect SWR. You can have a dummy load that has perfect SWR and it's not a fantastic antenna. So completely different. But what is radiation efficiency and how do we measure it? Well, that's why I talked about these two things. You got to use those two things in a resonant antenna to understand your radiation efficiency. It's real simple. After a whole page of equations, you can derive it to one simple equation at the bottom of the page. It's the good resistor over the sum of the good plus the bad resistor times 100%. So just looking at this, Nick, what do? We want to minimize your bad resistor. You want to minimize that as much as possible to get it as close as we can to 100%. You'll never be 100%. Getting close to 90% is amazing. In fact, anything over 85% is fantastic, given that most antennas, and that's why commercial manufacturers don't publish it, most antennas are around 50, 60% at best. Okay. Any questions before I go to the next slide? Is that pretty straightforward? Radiation efficiency? Silence.
I'm sure everyone's got it, Greg.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure. All right, let's look at some charts and graphs. Let's try to understand this. One of my favorite, one of my geek heroes, I've got two or three geek heroes when it comes to ham radio, is John Oppenheimer. He did a lot of great work for QST and QEX magazine, a lot of technical work. While you can't measure the loss resistance directly, you can calculate it. And he did this amazing experiment back in the early 2000s and did some and published some work. And I tried to put it in a very simple chart right here. And he said, all right, let's measure the loss resistance of radials on the ground. The loss resistance, that's the bad resistor, of when you lay your quarter wave radials on the ground. Or we call it surface radials. They're not buried, they're just laying on the surface. All right, he said, he figured out two radials are about 85 ohms loss resistance. And you say, well, Greg, 85 ohms, that's small, that's nothing. Plug it in the equation. Your quarter wave vertical, 37 over 37 plus 85 equals what? 30%. So if you're running two radials, let's say east and west, on the ground, you'll get a great SWR, you'll make contacts, but you're only radiating around 30 watts out of your 100 watts, or 3 watts out of your QRP 10 watts. You go, well, no, Greg, I got 4 radials, or I got 8 radials. Well, what happens? 4 radials is barely better, 37% efficiency. 8 radials, half your power is going in, heating up the bugs in the ground. You don't want to do that. In fact, it takes at least 64, ideally 90 radials laying on the ground, which isn't portable, to get you close to 90%. But what if I told you you have a choice? You can lay out 60 to 90 radials on the surface, or you can elevate 2 radials. Elevating 2 radials gets me 90% efficiency. So here's Greg out with his Performer antenna with 2 elevated radials and an elevated feed point, and we'll talk about it in just a moment. I'm radiating at least 90 watts or 9 watts if I'm a QRP. Here's Nick over here. He's all proud of his 8 radials on the ground. He's only radiating 45 to 50 watts. I have a 3 dB advantage over radials, 8 radials over the surface. And in fact, that's how this whole PDF thing started. I started using the Performer back in Parks on the Air, and I had so many hunters say, you're the loudest signal on the band, or you're the only station I can hear on the band. What are you using? How much power are you running? I'm just saying, I'm just using this Performer with 2 elevated radials, and I got high radiation efficiency. So it sounds like I've got more power because I'm radiating more power, but I'm still running 100 watts from my transceiver. Then there was another one of my heroes, Rudy Severance. You may have heard of him. He's pretty world famous. He did a lot of work. And remember, elevated radials is not a new thing. This started back in the 1930s with AM radio stations. When they wanted to reduce the number of 120 ground radials, they looked to elevate a fraction of that. And that's where the whole science started. But it hasn't been as popular in ham radio in recent years. But I believe it's really important. And so did Rudy Severance. So he said, all right, I'm going to go out to a field with some sophisticated equipment. I'm going to build a 40-meter wire antenna, vertical, 33.5-foot radiator, probably wire, 33-foot ground or surface radials, choke isolated, ABC, always be choking. And he says, I'm going to lay these 4 radials on the ground. I'm going to go out about a wavelength away with a sophisticated piece of gadgetry to measure microcurrents or whatever he was using at the time. And he said, whatever I measure about a wavelength away from the feed point, that's my 0 dB point. Remember, dB is a relative number, right? So he says, whatever that number was, whatever he calculated it to be or measured it to be a wavelength away, that's my 0 dB point. That's 4 radials on the ground. And then he started adding more radials, 8, 16, 32, 64, and he got a gain improvement. That's this y-axis. Gain improvement on the y-axis, number of radials on the x-axis. All right, and so he got out to 64 radials, surface radials on the ground, and he got a 6 dB improvement in terms of the signal strength in the near field, relatively near field. Why is that? Because you're creating a better counterpoise, something for the antenna to work off. You're helping close that RF circuit so it captures some of that radiation that ordinarily would have gone in the ground to heat up the bugs, sends it back to the feed point to be re-radiated. That's why more radials works better and makes it more efficient. All right. Then he said, all right, let's do the same thing. I'm now going to take those 4 radials on the ground, the same 0 dB point, the normalization point. But in this case, instead of adding more surface radials, I'm going to start elevating those same 4 radials above the ground and see what happens. He was shocked. In fact, I read that he was so surprised he ran this experiment multiple times to confirm it's true. 40 meters, he had those 4 radials elevated, and think of the logistics of this. This was a lot of work. Elevated 6 inches off the ground. He got a 5 dB improvement. 5 dB improvement. In fact, when he elevated a full 4 feet off the ground, he exceeded the radiation energy of 64 radials on the ground. His conclusion was basically 4 elevated radials at a height of 4 feet are equivalent or better than 64 quarter wave radials lying on the ground. That's huge. That's huge. And when I did this research 5, 6 years ago, I said, this is the antenna I want to start to use. So why is that? Why does that happen? All right, well, let's just get into a little bit more theory, and then this is the end of it. Here's your half-wave dipole. You've seen that. What happens when it's resonant? When it's resonant, you create a standing wave between current and voltage 90 degrees out of phase. Your current maxima is at the center. Your voltage maxima is at the ends. If you ever touch the end of a dipole when your buddy is transmitting, you get a little tingle. Sometimes it's a big tingle. And speaking from personal experience, it's not a pleasant feeling when that goes through your finger and elsewhere. But let's just use Ohm's law. All right, as you move down the antenna, you have your current going down and you have your voltage going up, right? Absolute value of voltage going up. What happens when voltage goes up and current goes down? What happens to the impedance? It goes up because this is a resonant antenna, right? Technically, it's purely resistive. So your impedance goes up. So that's why as you move the feed point down your dipole antenna, you have to increase the use of ununs, 4 to 1, 9 to 1, etc. In fact, let's take a look at that. Here's your dipole, 68 to 72 degrees roughly at the center. But as you move down, off center fed, 80% roughly, you get in the hundreds of ohms of impedance. Let's move even further. End fed, you get into the thousands of ohms. So off center fed, you use a 4 or 9 to 1. Or if it's end fed, a 49 or 64 to 1, because your impedance is so much higher than it is at the center. All right? Now, let's take that dipole that used to be here and bend it up. Let's bend it up. What is this beginning to look like? It's beginning to look like a quarter wave antenna, right? Quarter wave antenna, the same current maxima at the feed point. Here's your quarter wave vertical, and here's your elevated radial, in this case. Remember, this is the other half of the antenna. When you have a quarter wave antenna, that's why they say your radials are the other half of the antenna, because it's basically a bent dipole. Think of it that way, right? Now, when you were in science class, you probably talked about capacitance. I hope you did. At least we did here in the States. I'm sure you did. And it's a simple little equation. There's a factor here, which is a constant. Then there's the area of the plates. We can ignore that. Bottom line is capacitance is inversely proportional to the distance between the two plates of the capacitor. So when you separate two plates of a capacitor, What's happening to the capacitance? It's going down inversely to the distance of between the plates of the capacitor. All right. So the closer the plates, the greater the capacitance. The further the plates, the smaller the capacitance. Well, let's equate that to your antenna. Imagine your quarter wave radials, your elevated radials that are either on the ground or elevated above the ground, as two plates of a capacitor. This is one plate, and that's another plate. What happens as you move the radials up away from the ground? You're reducing your capacitance significantly. It's inversely proportional to the distance between these two plates, the radial and the ground. In this case, capacitive coupling, that's not your friend. Capacitive coupling is what sucks all that potential radiated energy and puts it into the ground. When these are on the ground, on the surface, your capacitive coupling is very high and you're losing because look at all the current that's in your radial. The first 2/3 of your radial has all this current. When it's on the ground, you're just heating up the ants. That's all you're doing. When you're elevating it, capacitive coupling goes way, way down, and all this energy can be rerouted back to the feed point to get re-radiated and increase your overall radiation efficiency. Does that make sense? Nick says yes. All right, good. All right. Now let's get to the fun stuff. I'm looking at the clock. Can I keep going to like maybe?
No, just keep going, Greg. Keep going.
All right, all right. I'm just trying to be polite. I don't want to drone on like the Titanic. I don't want to sink. Okay, let's talk about the good stuff. All right, enough of that stuff. Let's get pragmatic. So, my research 5 years ago, and I was still working at the time, and I snuck this in while I was working. Don't tell my boss. Oh, wait, I don't care. I'm retired now. I created for myself, which something that I called, eventually we called the Performer, portable, elevated, resonant Performer. 40 to 60 meters elevated quarter wave antenna. The feed point, and there's that mirror mount and telescope and whip I talked about in my Tinker Toys. I put it up about 52 inches. I did a lot of modeling and field testing. A lot of this is a result of dozens and dozens and dozens of hours of monotonous field testing, let me tell you. But I love doing it, so it's not real work. Put it on a tripod or on a PVC tube spike, whatever you want to do, but get it up around 4 to 5 feet, 52 inches. I don't know what that is in centimeters, so forgive me. You can make that translation. I know it's 2.5 centimeters per inch. I do remember that. So what is that, about 120 centimeters? There's the choke of the feed point. There's your coax, 50 ohm coax. Here's your Muller clip. And at the Muller clip, I just hooked two elevated tuned radials. In other words, these are tuned to each of these bands. And I designed it because I'm a sideband guy, right? So I work at the top of the bands, but I know a lot of folks are CW or digital. They work at the bottom of the bands. So I computer modeled and field tested these elevated radials for each of the bands to resonate at the center of the band, at the center of the band. These are fixed. You never have to change these lengths. Once you cut them and you use your Vago or Wago connectors to interconnect them, they're fixed. You use your telescoping whip as your variable. It's infinitely variable, so you can tune to resonance or tune to lowest SWR if you prefer. Now, how do you change the length of these radios? Let's say you're on the 20-meter band and you want to operate on the 15-meter band or vice versa. Let's say nowadays people are going the other way. You're on 15 meters, it's not open, you want to go to 20. Well, look what I have here, a non-conductive nylon segment. A non-conducting weed whacker line, about 4 inches. I just put it in between a couple of the Vagos, and the antenna, I put it in both of the elevated radials. The antenna looks down the wire. It sees the non-conducting segment. It goes, oh, that's the end of the elevated radial. I don't have to go any further. And that's exactly what it does. And I figured out that if you add all these up, that's about, I don't know how many inches that is, but I figured out what it is, what it's required to resonate in the center of the 15-meter band. When you want to switch to 20 meters, all you have to do is unhook this little segment and put it here at the end, here and here, and adjust your whip slightly. It takes me about 20 seconds to change bands, but that's all you have to do because I have it already figured out. Here, to elevate, again, I use Muller clips, And these are just fiberglass elevation poles. What they are here in the States, we call them snow driveway markers. You probably have them in Europe as well. They're made out of fiberglass and you put them to mark the sides of your driveway when you get a lot of snow. Well, we don't get snow in California, but I can still buy them on Amazon. And they're 4 feet long. You put them at a slight angle for, make these taut. It's about 36 inches. So if you elevate your feet point about 52 inches and you elevate the ends of your radials about 36, you're set. And what I found was really interesting. I did a lot of testing about the proximity of the two elevated verticals, the radials. When you put them 180 degrees apart, opposite each other, you get omnidirectional gain of about, on average, minus zero point 0.5 dBi. That's dB relative to a theoretical isotropic antenna. Don't worry about that. Minus zero point 0.5 dBi in all directions. But you're also got about a 90% efficiency. So people with better antennas but much lower efficiency can't radiate as much as you can. The takeoff angle or the maximum of peak radiation is about 24 degrees, which is perfect for regional communication like in Europe. A lot of performers are being used in Europe, and they work we have states in the US, so we work nearby states. You work nearby countries. You're much more fortunate to do that. But what I found is when you put them at 90 degrees from each other at a right angle, and I modeled everything from 20 degrees apart to 120 degrees apart, and I field tested them. I found the optimal distance between the two, or the optimal angle between the two, to give us a little bit of gain between the span of the radials is 90 degrees. So when you put them at 90 degrees apart, you get about almost a dB more gain between the span of the radials. And so in essence, it's minor, but it's like a directional vertical in a very slight way, with about a 3 dB front to back between the span of the radials and behind the radials. Now, when I talk about gain, am I talking about creating new energy? No, I'm just reconfiguring some of the energy that used to be behind the antenna, and I'm pulling it forward between the span of the radials. In fact, when you do that, you get some interesting radiation patterns like this. When you put your radials at 90 degrees apart, this is from the computer modeling software. When I first saw this 5 years ago, I got so excited. You can see this purple and this red are the strongest radiation areas. You can really see them from the side. You can see the purple in particular between the span of the two radials at 90 degrees. So you get this nice little lopsided radiation pattern where you get about a 0.5 dBi positive between the span and about a 3 dB front to back relative that signal strength relative to the signal strength behind you. And in some cases, that's optimal because you've got some noise behind you, or you want to work a different part of the world or the continent. So it's nice to have that option. Or if you just want to go omnidirectional, you put the radials opposite each other. This is my antenna proving ground, my tiny backyard. You can run it on a tripod, or here's a PVC mount. The QST magazine loved this, so they featured that in the article. To kind of give you a close-up, here it is on a tripod. This is a very inexpensive tripod, about 45 American dollars on Amazon. Very lightweight. Notice there's no span to limit the span of the legs. There's no plate. So if it's extra windy, you can spread them out a little bit longer and make the legs longer, so you can still maintain roughly 52 inches. But if you look up close, you can see I bring both of the elevated radials with a Muller clip, and I just hook them to one of the screws in the CB mount, the trucker's mount, whatever you want to call it. That's all I'm doing. It's just part of the ground system, but it is the other half of the antenna, because you can't see it, but there's like a little nylon washer here, shoulder washer, which separates this coupling nut and the whip from the plate, the ground. And then, of course, there's your choke. And at the end, there's your nylon segment. I'm all set for 20 meters because it sees that. That's just for structural purposes. And there's your little driveway marker. And it clips really easy. And it's so lightweight. It's so easy to carry. In fact, when you look at it, here's my radial string. And there's the nylon segments with the Vago connectors and the Muller clips. I keep a bag of the wire ferrules and the Vago connectors in my garage. And there's the crimper, relatively inexpensive. There's the nylon segments. You move between the already fixed radial segments, and in the PDF, I tell you how long to cut each segment. So it's already fixed to the center of the band. And then I tie it all up, put it in a circle with a little Velcro clip. And there's your main Muller clip that goes to the ground. There's your two others. Or if I go portable in my backpack or rucksack, I put them on a kite winder with my little. I love this thing. I love my little stick, my Rig Expert stick. This is a Byberry multi-tool, and you can get 40 meters. I just double the length of the 20-meter radials, put them end to end for one single 40-meter radial, put that at the base of the whip, and I'm on 40 meters, and it works extremely well. When I go backpacking or portable up in the hills, I have a version where I just cut the tube in half with a friction coupler at the halfway point to put them together. There's your spike, and there's your whip. I put them in my ICOM 705 backpack, and the whole thing is ready to go. It's that simple. And I go up into the hills. It works so well. And by the way, this is I think you guys have access to Chameleon out there in Europe. Chameleon makes this really small 40-meter coil, which I love. This is a more of a homemade version, which many of us do, but they make a really good small lightweight version, and that's the one I take in my little backpack. Uh, that's the virtual world. That's the setup. Here's the reality. I want you to notice two things. I want you to notice now SWR only reflects matching efficiency, not radiation. But when you have a good match and you have a highly radiated, efficient antenna, you've got a great antenna. And I want you to notice how well it matches 50 ohms on all the bands, very low, but I also want you to notice how broad banded it is. You can get the entire, incidentally, anything under 1.5 to 1 SWR is fine. Please don't use a tuner. You don't need a tuner. You don't get SDS, SWR derangement syndrome. A lot of people have that. They got to get the 1.01. You don't need it. 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 is fine. But if you look at the entire 20-meter band, it's under 1.3, under 1.4, depending on where you put your whip. Flat here, the entire 15-meter band, 1.2 to 1. All the bands, very broad bandwidth, very good SWR, very operable in the field, very efficient antenna. That's why it works so well. Let me just, for the balance of the time, I'll tell you what, I'll go another 6 minutes. I know I keep pushing it, Nick, but I know Nick says okay. All right, good. A lot of people said, this is a great antenna, the Performer. And here in the States, we can work a couple states over, or in Europe, you can work a couple countries over. But we want to work inside the state. We want to work inside the country. So you can do it a couple of ways. You can have a low-to-the-ground dipole. That's what a lot of guys do. I said, well, I already have this Performer antenna. And I have, so many of these operating around the world, about 50,000 at the time. I say, well, what can I do to help the Performer antenna become a 24-degree takeoff angle to something at a much higher angle radiation to make it NVIS, near vertical incidence skywave. In other words, instead of going out here and bouncing off the ionosphere to work way out here, 500 to 2,500 miles away, I want to get inside the skip zone. And what's a skip zone? The skip zone is the difference between ground wave. You know ground wave. You get ground wave. Depends on which band you're on. It's 40, 80 miles if you're on 40 meters, 5 to 10 miles if you're on 10. But you skip over a lot of ground, sometimes anywhere from 500 to 1,000 miles, depending on conditions, depending on the ionosphere. So how do you get around that? You come up with a much higher angle of radiation. Instead of being 24 degrees, let's put it up there in the 80s, close to straight up, and let's get inside that skip zone. Now, the interesting thing, without going into the physics, when you're at 10 megahertz and below, if you go up at a near vertical incident, that means near vertical angle of radiation, and you go through the D layer, which typically absorbs it, you hit the bottom of the F layer, it will come back down at roughly the same angle, near vertical incident skywave. You go up at 86 degrees, it will come down at basically the same angle. Interesting things happen when you go above 10 megahertz. Above 10 megahertz, it's not considered NVIS anymore, but I call it high angle radiation. And you can still have a lot of fun working on 20 meters 17, 15, 12, and 10 when they're open, uh, at high angle radiation to work inside the skip zone. So when I work inside of California on 20 meters, I typically use this antenna. Like when I'm in San Francisco Bay Area, I want to work LA, which is about 300 miles, I think. If I use my performer, I skip right over them. When I use the Performer NVIS version, I can work Southern California. I can also work states nearby. And what does it look like? Simple. All I did, here's your Performer antenna. Nothing has changed. You just take both of those radials and you put them to one of the elevation stakes. So it's one big fat radial, if you want to call it that. You use a very short telescoping whip, and I do this because I want to make this tunable. So it's like a tunable dipole. Think of it as a tunable inverted V almost. Your radiator is not only the short telescoping whip, about 34 inches, but it's also this extended wire out to the other elevation pole. And I already calculated, not only did I calculate all the radial segments you need to resonate in the center of each of the bands, I did the same on the radiator. So this is your radial, this is your radiator. So think of it as kind of a dipole close to the ground, right? All you have to do is cut these segments on one piece of wire, add this one piece of linked wire to the very short telescoping whip, and you get this absolutely gorgeous, big, beautiful bubble of radiation. Look at that. Look at this. 86 degrees omnidirectional. Isn't that gorgeous, Nick? Straight up and straight down on under 10 megahertz, above 10 megahertz. A little bit, it refracts at a little bit bigger angle, but you still get to work stations inside your skip zone. I love that. And just to kind of buzz through some of the other antennas to whet your appetite to get you to go to my website if you want. These are all free designs. They're all 15 to 20 page PDFs. You can look up the parasitic array. This is the one that I've been using more recently because the conditions have been so bad. It basically has a 3 dB gain, twice the forward directed energy as a single performer. So if you want to double your forward gain on your performer, you just put up a second performer, but you don't put coax to it. It's about a quarter wavelength away. It's a little bit longer, becomes a reflector, like in a Yagi antenna, except it's vertical. It's a reflector, and it gives you extra radiation, forward radiation, average of 2.7 dBi across all the bands, with close to 8 dB front to back. Remember, the performer has a 3 dB. If you put the radials at quarter, 90 degrees, you put these radials 180 degrees, they have to be omnidirectional. You get close to 8 dB front to back. It's a beautiful. And it looks like this. You can see the curve. You can see from the top, here's your reflector, and here's your radiator. And it looks like that. It's like a cardioid pattern, they call that. I also have half-wave antennas where I use off-center fed 4-to-1 unen or an end-fed 49 or 46 to 1. Real simple. It's just basically a vertical dipole with a short counterpoise, which lays on the ground. And the counterpoise is also band linked because, again, this is one band at a time, resonant. But it's very fast to change the band. You just move your non-conducting segment in the band linked counterpoise, just like you would with your two radials, except you just have one on the ground. That only needs to be up because there's far less current on a half wave antenna. Remember, on a quarter wave antenna, it's at the feed point. On a half wave, you're feeding it down here. So your current maximum is up here. So you can run your counterpoise, lay on the ground. You won't have any capacitive coupling to speak of. Minor, but it's not a problem. You keep your feed point up a couple feet, at least maybe a foot at the closest to the ground. I like a couple feet. If you want some extra efficiency in terms of matching, there's some higher grade 4-to-1 unons. I love this 56-to-1 unon from a company called My Antennas. I'm sure you have European equivalents. Matching efficiency 91% here, 96% there. So certainly well over the design radiation efficiency. So it's a really good antenna from that standpoint. And of course, here's your off-center fed versus an end fed. You can see a lower takeoff, about 18 degrees takeoff angle on the end fed, about 21 degrees takeoff on the off-center fed. I've worked Europe from California over the pole on the Dominator antenna. Yeah, I love that antenna. All right, Um, And I love the Brits. I love the Brits, Nick. Les Moxon, he had this beautiful antenna, which he kind of created back in the 1980s, inspired by those Aussies. Fred Canton, who came up with the square, he kind of created this, and it's brilliant. It uses, I call it a bent dipole. That's basically what it is. It's a two-part antenna, and he has a non-conducting piece right here. So here's your front radiator, like this. Okay. And here's the tube version. Here's the wire version. It's the same thing. There's a non-conducting segment right there and right there. Okay, so it's fed in the middle like a dipole. It's up a half wavelength. And then you have behind it a parasitic reflector, bent. Same thing. It's a little longer. You can see it's a little longer, but it's right here and it's right there. That's a Moxon antenna. And like a dipole, it needs to be up a half wavelength if it's horizontally polarized. So I love this antenna, and I thought, yeah, it's good, but it's hard to get it up to, especially portable, especially on 20 meters. I wanted to work 20 meters. So I came up with a different version. I came up with a couple of key differences, but it's Moxon inspired, so I give him all the credit. I came up, instead of having it fed in the middle, I feed it at the end. I feed it at the end. I call it a bent end-fed half wave. Here's your radiator, and I'm using part of the whip and part of all these band segments to a non-conducting segment here. So this becomes your radiator, your bent end-fed half wave radiator, and behind it, that's a non-conducting segment, so they're separated. This becomes your bent reflector, and there's another non-conducting segment there. You see that? So you need two telescoping whips. This is going to be a little bit longer than your radiator, but I already have it all calculated out. All you have to do is, these are identical wires. You cut them for each of the bands, you vago them together, and that's how you change bands. You take out some of these band segments to operate from 10 meters to 20 meters. But look at this is a lot of guys use this antenna for DX. Average a 3.4 dBi gain. Remember, it's only about 20 inches off the ground. 20 inches off the ground, very portable. You get 3.4 dBi gain on average, front to back, 15 dB. 15 dB. This antenna was another one of the antennas I used to work Europe, work Asia, DX from Parks on the Air. Just running 100 watts off of my ICOM 7300. This has become a very popular antenna. I introduced it in February, and I have about 10,000 downloads on it already. So, and I answer a lot of questions on it. People are having fun with it, and that's what the radiation pattern looks like. You can see here's your bent end-fed radiator, and here's your slightly longer bent reflector. Okay. Coming out in a couple of months, and I'm finishing up here, Nick. The full wave triangular loop. Basically, you use a 4-to-1 balun with a B. 4-to-1 balun. It's a full wave antenna. It goes up the whip. And notice I tried to design this so if you already made the performer, you can use the same components. Except in this case, it becomes a full wave triangle. And again, you have to take out segments to change bands, but it's really easy to do that. And I'll give instructions as to what these segments need to be. But you get this full wave triangle. And I have this little thing here at the end. The reason I do this is on the bigger bands, especially 15, 17, in particular 20, this wire can sag down a little bit. And you don't want it to touch that wire because it messes up the impedance. So I said, oh, I'll just create this little gizmo here at the end to keep the wire separated. That's about 6 inches, and it works extremely well. And you get a 2.6 dBi gain through the triangular loop, so it's bidirectional. You get a front to side of -6 going that way, and basically roughly -0.1, so basically flat going that way. So it's almost a three-sided antenna. It's a really cool, and I've used this at Parks on the Air, and it's worked really well. And it's a lower noise antenna because it's a full wave antenna. And you don't need any radials or counterpoise because, again, it's a full wave antenna. Full wave antenna. And you can see this is about 52 inches here, same as the Performer. This is about 36 inches, so there's a little slope, but not much. So that's almost 90 degrees, a little bit bigger than 90 degrees. But it works really well, and it's easy to deploy. To change bands, you just pull out these segments. and I'll have that in the PDF. The antenna that's coming out later this year is the Hammer Half Square. As I said, roughly a quarter wave, half wave, quarter wave. This thing has got great gain, great front to back, 2.6. I mean, again, it's bidirectional through the square, front to side, I should say. 2.6 dBi through the square. It's got a minus 15.5 dB loss going that way, minus 6 that way. So it's very directional. It focuses all the energy through the bidirectional. And I point over the pole to Europe and behind me to New Zealand and Australia from California. It works really, really well. This will come out later this year, probably in the early fall. And the final one that'll also come out in the fall is using the Nether. This is the compact inverted V. 20, 30, 40. I show it here. You can also run it on 60 and 80. The same concept. It's a fold back and it comes to here, but it makes it much, much smaller than a typical inverted V. And because it's low to the ground, it gives you some nice high angle radiation, which is what you're going to get on these lower bands, especially during the winter months and especially as we approach the solar minimum. And if you want to be the first to get these antenna designs, get on my antenna geek list. Okay. As I mentioned, some people wrote me early on and say I can't build my own antennas for whatever reason. So I have this company out in the Midwest hand make them, and they can buy them on a platform called Etsy. They do ship to Europe. Only about 20% of our orders go outside the country. But if you're ever interested, that's an option for you. They also have a lot of extra. They sell their own spikes, camouflage. These things, instead of using things to stick in the ground, they have this little tripod teepee thing that you can make to hold up your radials ends, or they also have guy ropes and such. So those are all my antennas, the current ones and the ones coming out. Go to my website, KJ6ER.net. It's always going to be there. Everything I produce is always going to be for free because I believe in sharing this with as many hams as I can because I want people to homebrew more of their own antennas. And that's it. And I'll stop right there.
Greg, that was absolutely superb. I think I in the meeting, I had various people were chatting to me, and my friend Ken G4VZV, one of our club members, who's out in Spain now, he just loves antennas. And
Mm.
about a third of the way through your presentation, Greg, his message was music to my ears. Um,
I
and
know
uh,
we're all geeks.
and I know he's been inspired, as has probably every single person in this room, because every one of us have, and other club members aren't here tonight. Greg,
Yeah.
we've got a bunch of particularly some younger guys who love
Yes.
POTA and SOTA,
Yep.
and often they're working at night or they've got young kids, and therefore
Yep.
coming on live is a problem. But I
Yep.
know they watch the videos and will take stuff
Good.
away. If you're watching now, some of you will be there during the rest of this week. Do go and have a look at Greg's website and pick up some of these plans because I think you'll be surprised how good this is. And Greg, yeah, we call them. I don't know about Mike and Adriana, but we call them Wago connectors as well.
Oh, you
And
do? Okay.
yeah, and I've been a big advocate of Wago
Good.
connectors for a long time, just because of the complete simplicity of them. You haven't got to muck around with a screwdriver. You haven't got to
Right.
muck around trying to properly clip things together. You've got two bits of wire. You push down a lever. Job done. It's connected.
And
So
I recommend
they're
using
easy.
ferrules, those little wire ferrules, because if you use braided wire, they get
Yeah,
worn out in the
yeah,
field.
they do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like the ferrules as well.
Yeah, clip. You need to clip the ferrules on so that you can put that into the connector.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that little tool. Yeah. I
yeah,
strongly recommend. And they're cheap, really inexpensive.
yeah.
Really inexpensive. So yeah, and I also, and I mean that sincerely, I answer all my emails every morning. So if you send me an email, remember, I'm in California, my time's different than yours, but I answer them every morning and I try to answer every email within 24 hours or less. And you can come up with all kinds of questions. Some guys I have this antenna at my house. How do you recommend I make it better? It has nothing to do with my antennas. And I give them some advice from my perspective. But I enjoy interacting with the ham community because I love this hobby and I want more people to homebrew antennas. So I want to encourage them to do that. That's why I share this for free. So send me an email if you have any questions. It's on the website.
Greg, let's just chuck it out to see if we've got any people with questions or
Yeah.
comments. So who wants to go first in the room here with a question or comment to Greg about his presentation tonight? Come on, music to my ears, Ken. You go off first, and then we'll go over to Jeff.
And Jeff raised his hand too. Go
Right.
ahead, Ken.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. Fantastic. Like I did say, it is music to my ears. Let me just say, you and I could work together. The
All right,
only
let's
thing
do
I
it.
haven't done is I haven't done the modelling. There's no reason. I'm an old-fashioned guy. I've been licensed 50 years, and I've
Wow.
done it through learning and reading books. But
Good.
my antennas at the present time is a quarter wave vertical whip on a trolley. The only difference that I
On a what? Say
have
again.
on a sack trolley.
What's that?
Well, it's you carry bags of cement on a sack trolley and pull it. One of
Okay.
those type of devices, and
Okay.
I
That's
use a ground tuning unit.
that's what your
And if you
wife
want
used
to,
for shopping. That's what
yeah,
your wife used for shopping.
Oh, shopping
yeah,
cart. Okay.
yeah, I like a car. Now,
Okay.
when I say ground tuning unit, you'll probably throw knives at me
Oh no,
because
I
you're
won't do that.
talking about radios. But I've taken the other option, the other way out, which is use a ground tuning unit so that I get almost, well, between 90 and 100% efficiency. I
Ra-
must
ra-
do with 60
Radiation
watts.
efficiency, really? Yeah.
Yeah, with 60 watts, I can work anywhere
Okay.
using that saltwater ground plane.
Oh, yeah. You got salt water. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but what I also
Oh,
wanted to
yeah.
just mention is that I've been doing experiments with what I class as real ground plane antennas that are high up in the air. I've
Oh,
also
yeah, yeah.
been, and at the moment I do have one. I've not really done enough experimenting on it because it's only been up in the air. Oh, sorry, I've only erected this antenna in the last fortnight, and it is an Italian commercial antenna called Grazioli, which I'm not sure if you've heard of, but
No.
if it's an Italian antenna, it does work, I can tell you. I've had it up at about 16 feet above ground with
Okay.
elevated radials.
Wow.
My intention is to put it up to about 20 to 25 feet
And you
above
know what you're
ground.
doing. You know what you're lowering your angle, maximum
Yeah,
angle of radiation for DX.
yeah, yeah, but
Higher up you
because
go.
it's a new antenna, I'm being a little bit careful with my nearby neighbours, so it's getting raised a foot every week. I
You got to
don't
sneak it
want
up.
more.
I
Um,
get it. I get it.
But that one has actually got the ability to have 5 bands at any one time. It's basically got four, one, two, three, four, five vertical quarter waves on a mount using plastic
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like just like
sectioners.
the DX Commander, like the DX Commander. That's like
Like
a
the
fan
DX,
type.
yeah. This
It's
is
like a
a
fan.
this is a much stronger version of what I
Yeah,
call
yeah,
the DX
yeah. I get it.
Commander.
Yeah.
And it's got its elevated radials. I'm going to say this. I don't know how well it will perform. I've worked a few stateside stations in the
Good.
first week that I put it up, but I'm interested to see how it goes. There is a 40-meter add-on for the top, which is about another 2 meters higher. But I won't put that and I won't go to the expense of putting it on yet because my other antenna is a 40-meter dipole, an Envis dipole with
Yeah.
a reflector wire underneath it.
Underneath it. Yeah, yeah. That
And
works.
you know what I'm doing there.
I know
So
exactly what you're doing. Yeah, sure.
absolutely, and all I can say is, yeah, I love it. I love erecting antennas. I've read that many books. I do it from memory and from measurements I've got in my head. But I
Yeah.
will say this: if you can get one of these and get a true ground plane. I mean, you've not used the word ground plane in all
No,
of you. Um, but I always assimilate a ground plane to being a quarter
that's
wavelength
right.
high.
No, you're right. That traditionally
Um,
that's the definition. That's correct.
but my very recent experimenting with a 40-meter antenna, which is vertical, is using elevated radials at 36, approximately 1 meter above ground.
Perfect. That's the same as me.
But I also tried it at ground level, and I didn't mess about. I went straight back to the elevated radials. Much easier, much simpler, only 2 fastening points. You don't
Yep.
trip over them. And
Right.
like you say, I did notice that if you angle them
Yes.
different directions, they become slightly
Yeah. Yeah.
directional.
That's it, right. It's
Yeah,
modest. Like you saw in my performer design, it was about a dB, right? And that's, dB with a
yeah,
little front to back, 3 dB front to back. That's
yeah.
something. I mean,
And the
people
other
notice differences. Yeah.
And the other thing, the final point is you
Yes.
mentioned about your SWR not being that important, and I fully agree with you there. It doesn't matter if it's 1.5 to 1 or even 1.6 to 1, but
Correct.
if you can get that resonant point at the feed point, I should say, and get the resonance, you've cracked it. So yeah, I would say to anyone, and I know there's others on the group that have experimented with vertical antennas. There used to be a saying, vertical antennas are for boys and beams are for men. I do
Yeah, I
not
know.
agree. I
We've
do
heard
not agree.
no, I don't
Oh,
agree.
okay. Greg, thanks very much for a great presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you're lucky to live over salt. That is the best conductor. And Jeff agrees with me. He's nodding his head. Yeah, I mean, you barely need elevated radials when you live on salt. It's like being on the ocean. But most of us don't have that luxury. So we have to have. No, one interesting thing with the Performer, remember, all mine are portable antennas. So that's why I keep it at 52 inches above ground, the feed point. And that gives you 24-degree takeoff angle, which is, I wouldn't call that superb DX, but it's continental. It's good
Mm,
continental. If you raise it, I did some modeling just for fun, and you're not going to do this. If you go from 52 inches up to like 300 or 400 inches, that 24-degree takeoff can get down to 18,
yeah,
15 degrees. And then you look at the component right around 5 degrees. Oh, you more than double your gain at 5 degrees, and that's incredible DX. So, but that's not practical when you go portable. You just want it up uh,
yeah,
52 inches and you're done, and it works really well.
yeah. Super. Thank
Yeah,
you.
good. Thank you. Jeff, you had a question? You got to
Okay, well,
unmute yourself.
more comment. Very good,
Oh,
very good afternoon, Greg. I really
I
enjoyed your talk. Great talk. Absolutely great.
thank
I
you.
went through your documentation, through the different PDF documents, and by your explanation, I even understand better. I mean, it clarifies certain things.
Good.
You
Good.
always
I'm glad
have
to.
to, yeah, you can you can read all kinds of things, but sometimes it's better to be explained. So that became much clearer.
Good.
I also registered for your newsletter, for your heat list or whatever you call it. So I sent that this morning. I have one question. What would happen to the Performer if you would only put one radial? It would probably be more into one direction or more focused.
Slightly, yeah, yeah. It's very slight. I mean, it's basically becomes like a bent
Yeah,
dipole when you have one
yeah.
radial, and there's no reason why you can't do that. I like two because I wanted the omnidirectional versus if you just have one, you can't make it omnidirectional because there's a little bit of
Okay.
favoring
Yeah,
towards that one
yeah.
elevated vertical. But I only wanted to. I didn't want more than two because then it wouldn't be as portable. So, but you can still run the Performer. Like I run the Performer on 40 meters with one 40-meter
Radio. Yeah,
radial, which is
yeah.
basically my two 20-meter radials end to end, making one long 40,
Okay.
and it works. It
That's a
works
good
just
idea.
fine. It works
Yeah,
just
that's a
fine.
good
I mean,
idea.
yeah, it works really well. And
Yeah.
the 40 meters, I mean, you don't have that much directionality anyway at that frequency. So you don't need to work too far away. At least here in the States, I get a couple states over. At nighttime, I can go across the country. But yeah, no, I like two radials because it's a good compromise between having more, which adds you very little benefit to efficiency, which is why you elevate, and it gives you a little bit of directivity between the span. So I thought that was a cool way to use the antenna.
Okay,
But
great.
I would say probably from based on the emails and interactions I get, 60, two-thirds of the people put them omnidirectional, one third put them directional at 90
Yeah,
degrees.
yeah, yeah. Okay. I guess the difference between two radials and 90% and 90 degrees configuration and one radial is probably minimal. The
Yeah, it
difference
gives
is
you some.
probably
It gives you
it gives you
some.
some, yeah. One
Yeah,
to one dB.
we like to say it favors the
Yeah.
radial, but it's not like a Yagi antenna. It's not
Okay.
going to give you that much gain. It just, it like I said, people get confused when they think of gain. They think we're creating energy. We're
Yeah.
not. We're
Yeah.
just reconfiguring the energy that's already around the antenna, and we're
Yeah.
pulling it a little bit towards that
Yeah.
radial.
Yeah.
That's all it's doing.
Yeah. Okay, great. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Danke.
Yeah.
What else do I know?
I'm Dutch speaking, but no problem.
Oh, you're Dutch. What is it? What is,
No,
well, you
no,
know,
I'm
Nether.
not Dutch. I'm Flemish Dutch speaking.
Oh, Dutch speaking. Hi. So you noticed when I said my
Dank
nether
u wel,
antenna.
dank u wel. Goedenavond, dank u wel.
Thank you well.
So we speak like the Dutch in the
You speak like that.
Netherlands.
And
Yeah,
how do you say thank you again?
dank u wel.
Thank you well.
Yeah, so that's the majority in Belgium. 57% of the people are actually speaking Dutch. But
Really?
everyone, also the bands, everyone start to talk French to me, which is not problem. I speak French, but our mother
Bonjour.
tongue is, well, 57% is Dutch. And
Yeah, interesting.
yeah,
See, all of you in Europe are so much better than us in the States because you have all these different languages. We
yeah,
just
yeah,
have American English,
yeah.
which is butchered British English, I know.
I enjoy languages. I enjoy languages.
Yeah, good.
It opens doors.
It does. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
so does ham radio. That's why I
yeah,
love this.
yeah, absolutely.
We
The
can do
combination
this.
of the two is brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, why do we go on Zoom when we can talk over the radio? That's much more challenging, much more hard to do, but I like the challenge. This is too
Thank you.
easy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Greg.
My
Really
pleasure.
enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
Have we got anyone else who's got a question or comment to put to Greg?
Oh, it's getting late out.
Adriana, yeah.
Adriana.
Excellent talk. Was very, very interesting. I have a question to the elevated radials. We are using a homebrew Rybakov antenna,
Oh, yeah.
which
Yeah,
is
sure.
multi-band,
Yeah.
and we have ground-mounted radials. It works quite well, but we wonder if it would probably work a little bit better if we would elevate it a little bit. But I think then we would need specific radials for the band we work.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. How do you say yes in German? Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Da? No.
yeah.
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 That's too easy. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, the answer is yes. When you have radials on the ground, they're capacitively coupled to the ground, so they don't need to be tuned to the band, right? In fact, when I first started, I used 10 short radials, 10-foot radials on the ground for all the bands, and it worked just fine. Once you elevate, you're going from basically a ground plane to a counterpoise in the air. And so you have to tune it to that particular band. So yeah, I mean, I've had elevated and quarter wave antennas where I have different length radio. I had a multi-band vertical, which I put on the roof of my house, and it was elevated. And I had the radials going down the slope of the roof, but I would put two radials per band tuned to that band opposite each other for like 3 or 4 bands, and it worked really well. So if you were to do that with a Ribikoff, now I've never experimented with it, but I understand what a Ribikoff is. You probably can do something similar, but you will have to, do a lot of work in figuring out the right length of those tuned radials for the Ribikoff, because I know it is multi-band, and you want to put typically two radials per band opposite each other for omnidirectional coverage.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
it's a
That
good
might be a
experiment.
solution.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you do it, send me an email and let me know how it works. I'd be curious.
We will.
We will do.
Good, good.
Can we go to Georgia? Steve.
Oh, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you
Oh,
so much for that.
now there's an
And
accent I know so well.
well, thank you so much for great information, great ideas, and just great presentation.
Oh, thank
I
you.
wondered if you could comment just real briefly on the different telescoping whips that are available.
Well, in Europe, I don't know. I think there's a lot of different companies. Here in the States, I use Chameleon Steve. I really like Chameleon because they're so durable. People have bought some Chinese whips and they break after a couple, 3 months in the field. But I'm pretty rugged with I'm out in the field. I do a lot of camping, a lot of backpacking, and I'm always extending and retracting, and they're dropping on the ground, hitting rocks. My chameleon whips have been out in the field for 5 years now and never had a problem. So those are my favorite. But there have been some new ones that have come out. Alpha Antenna has got a couple, or they're well built. They have a 34-foot whip, which I was sent and I tried it, and it's great, but you have to guy it. So I don't know, it's a lot of work. Um, but those are the two that I use here in California. But I don't know if you've heard of any others. I know there's a lot on Amazon, but they typically tend to be the cheaper ones that come from Asia.
Yes, I've had some good luck with the overseas ones and some really abysmal luck with the overseas ones.
Okay.
If you play it right and they offer it to you for $2, you take the chance. But uh,
Yeah, $2.
so yeah, have you tried it with wire instead of a
Yes, I
telescoping
have.
thing?
I have.
Hmm.
Yes, in fact, that's a great question. There are, there have, when I first designed my half wave antennas, I
Uh-huh.
used my Spider Beam, a good German company. Spider Beam, I don't know how you say it in German, but my Spider Beam fiberglass telescoping pole and
Hmm.
wire segments, and it worked extremely well. The problem is when you change deployment locations, your ground and your near field surroundings change, which impact your impedance,
Hmm.
which changes the length of wire required in the radiator. So that's why when I have a whip, it's infinitely adjustable and variable,
Yeah.
and I can tune it to every deployment location. When I just use fixed wires and a telescoping fiberglass mass, you can't. So what I did in the past is I would cut them a little short, and then I'd
Hmm.
carry little 1, 2 inch segments of wire to clip into the line if I need to lower the frequency depending on that location. But yes,
Hmm.
no, I have, and it's the same. I mean, the nice thing about the whip, it's a little thicker, so you get a little bit more bandwidth. The thicker your
Yeah.
radiator, the more bandwidth you get. A little bit more
Uh-huh.
bandwidth. But other than that, it works. You can do it either way.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks again. I don't know if we've talked on the PODA activations or not. We
No.
may have. If we have, it's using the performer in most
Yeah,
likelihood.
Alpha Alpha 4 Bravo Whiskey. I'll have to look
Uh-huh.
it up to see if we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And thanks everyone. It's great to see everyone.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, Steve's point, Greg, about the telescopic whips,
Yeah,
quite important. I mean, a number of us have bought the Chinese ones. I've been using them probably for a couple of years. I haven't had one break yet,
good.
but this is the but. They are very flimsy,
Yeah.
and where I live, literally, the picture on the screen here, my background picture, is the hills around where I live.
Oh
So
my gosh, that's
I
beautiful.
walk up into those hills. We get a
Wow.
lot of wind, and I
Yes.
have to guy the whip antenna even when
Yeah.
it's mounted on the ground. So I've tried with the tripod. The problem with the tripod is you've then got to try, and some of the ground is very difficult with stones and rocks to
Yep.
try and get some pegs into the ground to hold
Yeah.
the tripod up.
Yeah.
So I gave up with that, and then I then got a very, very heavy tent peg, about a foot long, and
Yeah.
attached to the top of it one of the little rectangular points to take the SO239 connector,
Okay.
and I can shove that down into the ground. But I've had to do that because when I try and put it up further, the guying is even more complicated. And
Right.
the last thing, as you said, I agree with the start of your presentation. One of the key things is when you arrive on site, I don't want to be spending 30 or 40 minutes fiddling around with guys that I'm going to trip over as I'm doing it. And then the
Yep.
radials, I'm definitely going to trip over in addition
Yeah.
to the guys. So,
Yeah.
I've ended up, and I know I would get a much better performance using elevated radials. I've ended up using wires on the ground, and I've worked into Alaska, I've worked into California,
Sure.
on
Sure.
10 watts from here, on
Sure.
single sideband and on CW and
Yep.
into VK. So it can be done, but I know I'd get better performance. But it's the practical bit of it
Yeah.
with wind, which is the big issue.
Yeah, yeah, I completely understand. I've done all kinds of things when I've gone backpacking, rock sacking, and I found sticks and other things to elevate my radials if I
Yeah,
couldn't get anything in the ground. I've even tied them to trees nearby because
yeah.
I want the efficiency and I got to get my feet point up about 52 inches for ground out here. But yeah, no, you do what you have to do, and that's part of the fun. That's part of the challenge. You can get very creative, like that one tripod teepee. I've taken 3 of those elevation poles and I put a big rubber band here at the top and I spread them out and the ground friction holds it in place and I attach to that. You can do that as well. I mean, you just got to get creative,
Yeah, yeah.
but you do what you have to do. We don't live on saltwater flats like some of us do in the crowd.
I've got a question, just one question, Greg.
Sure.
On the telescopic whip, whatever make you've got of it,
Yeah.
how do you have some way of marking the point you want to get your whip to? And if so, how do you do it?
Okay, I don't believe in marking whips
Okay.
because remember, in my antenna designs, the radiator is the variable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I found is impedance changes, it can change pretty significantly depending on your deployment location, depending on the ground conditions and the near field surroundings. Okay, the fan guy's ready for me. Okay. So it depends on the near field. So one time where you have your whip will be different in a different location. So what I do, it's real simple. I just remember the number of sections that I need to extend it for. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
if you do it
Yeah.
so many times, I need to
Yeah. Yeah.
go,
Just put
okay,
it up
6,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Yeah.
and then I remember that, and then I check my SWR, and then I just tune from there.
Yeah.
And it's always different depending on my deployment
Yeah.
location.
Yeah.
It's always
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah. I wondered. I mean, that's what I do as well. But I wondered if you had another way of doing it.
No, there's no.
I did experiment at one stage by making out various pieces of cord and holding it up against that. But that's too much for fiddle.
It's too much work, and it's going to vary. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
people like to do that. I just remember it's good for our brains anyway.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Greg. I know you've got to go because you've got your
Well,
guy
I
waiting
don't.
for you there.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on you. I could deal with this while you guys talk for a second and come back, or we can just end it.
Greg, go and I mean, two things. Let's just, for the purposes of our video that's going out on YouTube tomorrow morning, I think we'll just wish Greg a very happy evening. It's been a fantastic presentation. Really, really
Thank you.
enjoyed it. It's been
Thank
great
you.
fun, and thank you very much for coming along. What we do in our meetings, Greg, is that we always have an after chat, and people stay on for as long as they want. So if you do manage to get back in a few
I
minutes,
will.
if
I'll
we
come
don't
back. I'll
see
come
you,
right back.
okay, brilliant,
I'll be right back. You guys talk amongst yourselves. I'll go on mute and take care of this wonderful person that installed our attic exhaust fan.
brilliant. Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.